Remara and the Darkened Man, Arc 1, Chapter 1. The door shrieks whenever it opens. It is startling, even after weeks of hearing it. Once in the morning and once in the evening it screams open, then closed. A pair of boots tramps out in the morning and drags in at night. The man with the trembling hands has one long loaf of bread under an arm and a heavy sack slung over the other shoulder. He approaches the crumbling fireplace and drops into the chair before it like a puppet with cut strings. He is coated in darkness, a liquid blackness so oily thick that she cannot see his face. She lies in the fireplace, curled up in the ashes and the last few embers, sluggish with cold. There's barely enough heat to last her the day in his absence. Every night he returns with a loaf of bread for himself and the sack of coal for her. He sets the loaf on the hearth and reaches into the sack, withdrawing 2 or 3 lumps at a time and placing them just inside the fireplace, careful not to touch her. When he has emptied a quarter of the bag next to her, he closes the sack and leans back in the chair. At the speed of crystallized honey, she coalesces a limb. A single tendril forms, faintly orange but much too clear from the cold, and reaches for the coals. She feels his attention on her as she reaches. She wonders what he thinks. Is he upset by her slowness? Is he concerned? Is he angry? He barely speaks. He has told her nothing of himself from the day he found her, a nearly solid lump of clear glass in his fireplace. Not even his name. And yet he brings her coal. She finally grasps one lump, igniting it with the little heat she has left. It pulses in the center, going from black to orange in an instant. A fragile flame erupts from the surface of the coal, and she draws the heat of it back into herself. Magnifying that heat, she expels it back into the coal, a little brighter and a little hotter than before. By the next intake of heat, she is moving a little swifter to pick up the next coal. By the third coal, she is fluid enough to reach out and pull the rest of the coals up against her body. They ignite all at once in a merry blaze. In the next instant, she consumes all of that warmth. In, out, in, out. She revels for a moment in the looseness and vibrancy of each particle in her being. For a moment, there is no such thing as cold. There is no winter outside. She lives in a world where there is so much heat, she never slows down enough to be still and clear and unmoving. Remara? His voice is slow, like the cold lives in his throat and won't let go of the words. She turns her attention to him. His body hunches forward, arms resting on the knees. Remara, tell me a story. The plea comes through the swirling black tar that clings to him, muffling every word. The bread lies untouched on the hearth. She reaches a tendril out to the bread and sends a little warmth into it. Heat is always stronger when it's leaving, like a shout, so she tries to restrain it, whisper-like. She watches the bread until the heat changes its color to a darker brown. Then she pulls her tendril back. A story? He asks again. She sends her words out, end to end. Your bread is warm, and you should eat it before it gets cold and hard again. Please eat something, and then I promise I will tell you more. But when I tell you the stories before you eat, then you forget the bread. And if you forget the bread for many days, then all your steps are heavier when you come in, and you cannot even stay awake for the stories, so please eat the bread first. He sighs with his whole body, then reaches out and takes the bread. Breaking off the end seems to cost him everything. He brings the heel of the loaf up to the darkness that surrounds his face, where the bread vanishes a little at a time. The coals crack apart under her. The bread tears every few minutes. It is a long, silent wait. When he reaches the middle of the long loaf, he sets the rest in his lap and leans forward once again. The plea is repeated in his posture. She is formless, a large lump of molten glass with no discernible features. From out of this mass she shapes a body he can recognize. The first thing she forms is a head, round like his but with a long swath hanging down off the back. She has seen some humans have longer bits hanging down from their heads like that, and she always liked the look of it. She makes rough eyes, a nose, and a mouth for herself so that she can face him in a way he understands. She rises, drawing together an upper body with two long tendrils below the head, like arms. She concentrates, trying to remember that the two arms of a human have limitations. They can only bend and twist at a few points, and then there are 5 tendrils at the end of each arm that each have their own rules on how to bend. She does not make legs. She's not going anywhere until the outside world is warm again. One day, a long time ago, I made a friend who looks like a man and like a tree at the same time, and he has short frizzy moss growing out of his head, and the moss has tiny blossoms throughout it, and his name is Naid. His skin looks like a very old tree trunk, but his shape is like a human man, and his eyes are human eyes, so brown they're almost black, and when I met him, he seemed to know who I was, but I did not know who he was. There is something inside a human that forces them to pause in their speech. This is not something Remara has. She thinks she could mimic the pauses if she studied speech, but she believes it is more important that she learns how to make a proper face. Except it is hard to practice a proper face for this man because she cannot see his face to understand its shapes. She can study her own memories, but they are not quite as useful as looking into a face, and his is obscured. So her face remains more like a picture of a face, and though the words resound out of her whole body along with heat and light, she moves the flat mouth along with the words and ensures that her eyes open and close a few times. My friend Naid told me that once upon a time I was a whole person that was broken apart into little bits, and he was so very sad when he told me this story, but I could not understand at that time because I had not felt sadness before, but I think that I was able to help him feel less sad, and now I understand a little better what he was feeling because I wished that he could stay with me, but he never stays in the same place for very long. But not for the same reasons as me, so he wished me well and hoped to meet me again, and I wanted to hug him, but I cannot touch him ever, because I would hurt him very badly if I touched him, and when I realized that, it was my first time being sad. Drip, drip, drip. As she speaks, black liquid begins to drip from the man's body. Like water sliding down the length of an icicle, drops of darkness travel from the top of his head to the end of his hands, dangling from atop his knees or down to the black puddle rapidly forming at his feet. Drip, drip. Naid left me behind, and I do not remember where he was going or where I went next, but I remember a beautiful place that I saw where the landscape looked like glass, but stronger and thicker, and all the ground is clear, and it pushes up in lovely shapes, and I flowed over and around and through the shapes. And here she begins to change. In the telling, she forgets the human arms she's been moving, puppet-like, to underline parts of the story. She forgets to move her mouth. She forgets to open and shut her eyes. She stretches out like a ribbon, unbounded by bones and joints, flowing up and down and around in ecstasy as she recalls the freedom of exploring that new land. She flings tendrils of herself up and around, twisting back and looping herself in graceful arcs to mimic traveling around jutting pillars of crystal and hills of polished quartz in a country that reflected the sun like a million glittering gemstones. The words melt away into a silvery sound that wells up from deep within her, a gentle chiming in a dozen tones that shiver the rotting logs of the shack and cause the fireplace to rain dust. By the time she remembers herself, dim light creeps under the door and through the shutters. Sunlight falls on the man's face, now clearly visible. His eyes are pine needle green, and they glitter, and water drips from them. There are deep lines everywhere, on his forehead, in his cheeks, around his mouth. Every part of his face is pulled down. His hair is black and white and travels down both sides of his head to meet at the bottom of his face, circling his mouth. Half a loaf of bread sits untouched on his lap, and there is a large pool of darkness under his chair. Not a shadow is left on his body. She stops in the middle of her chimes. Pulling herself back into a recognizable form, she bows her head. "Apologies, I have continued all night once again. Please sleep or finish your bread and be strong. I do not wish to harm you." His mouth opens, then closes. He shakes his head, wiping his sleeve across his face. His jacket is green like his eyes and makes him look much bigger than he is. He lifts the bread to his mouth and takes a bite. Now that she can see his face, she studies it carefully. She notes the way each individual hair on his eyelids curl up and out. She sees how the eye moves in tiny jerks. She watches how many times he needs to blink and that there is no rhythm to the blinking. His eyes remain, for the most part, fixed on her, as she shifts the parts of her that form eyes to better reflect the tiny details and behaviors in a human eye. The light is leaving time bright, and all the bread is gone. He stands, dusting his hands off on patchwork pants, and pulls the chair away from the fireplace. Standing away from the inky puddle by the hearth, he gestures at it. "Please." She needs no further invitation. She surges over the lip of the hearth and plunges tendrils into the puddle. It jerks. A scream like rending metal fills the air. It seeps across the floor, away from her, but she encircles it with her body and closes in. It shrinks, screeching as it boils away at the centermost point. She pulls the circle of herself tighter and tighter until every last speck has burned off and the discord falls silent. The man stands nearby, his fingers curling and uncurling. "I would. Myself. If only I..." He shakes his head, then bends down to grab his sack. As she returns to the hearth, he carefully spills the rest of the coals there for her. She knows not to take them all at once, for it will be night before he returns with more. Tonight when he comes, she will make him eat all the bread first, and she will remember not to tell such a long story because he must sleep sometime. He needs food, he needs sleep, but he also needs the stories. She doesn't understand why, but it is important to him. He wants the stories more than food or sleep, but they are all important, and she has to make sure he gets all three. He throws the empty sack over his shoulder and stumbles toward the door. She has so many questions. Why do you come back every day covered in death spill? What do you do all day? What is it like out there? What is your name? What will happen to you when I have to go? She has stopped asking these questions out loud. She never receives an answer. She watches him with a strange ache in the core of herself for this sad man, and wishes she could make him warm in the place that is always cold. The door screams open. It shrieks shut. His footsteps fade away. Remara pulls one coal close and watches it turn orange. She thinks about what story she will tell him tonight.